Hello, I'm Mantastic'c and Fantastic, and today I want to talk about the Prince of Tennis collab that has just gone live in North America. So before I talk about all the cards individually, I want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a Twitter campaign going on, and if we are able to get that tweet to 10,000 likes, every single player will enjoy a free 7 or 8-star card at random from the Prince of Tennis collab. It's definitely in your best interest to do so, to hit that like button. But with that being said, the Prince of Tennis collab is an exciting event because it is a debut event, which means at least your first several rolls will hopefully not have too many duplicates. And when you look at the actual rolling pool itself, it is quite ginormous, which means there's a good chance you won't get multiple duplicates if you roll at least reasonably sparingly. And in addition to that, every single card has 2 weapon assists, and 2 weapon assists actually gives you much more flexibility. It makes it so that even like lower rarity cards do have some value, and if you're a newer player who doesn't have a very deep box and lacks many weapon assists, this could be a great time to pick up some of them, because even though like many of the cards in the bottom rarity I don't feel are particularly great for a more developed box, for players who have very few options available, it can provide some meaningful value for their box, because having vacant slots is worse than having any kind of weapon assist basically inherited on top of that. In addition to that, every roll will cost you only 7 magic stones to do so, and there are strong subs and weapons in this event. And one nice thing about that is that they tend to be power crept at a slower rate. Leaders are power crept the fastest, and then subs, and then weapons. So generally speaking, weapon assists tend to have the longest shelf life, so they can be nice long-term investments if it is a strong weapon assist. Furthermore, essentially every single 7 or 8 star has value in some way, shape, or form, which gives you a 33.9% chance to be happy, which is pretty close to a regular Super Godfest. Of course, the price of 7 versus 10 magic stones does give you more value, and along with the fact that, again, the bottom rarity gives you weapon assists that are quite easy to make by comparison to like Pantheon cards, which have to go through a massive multiple different hurdles to actually make their weapon assist. These are much easier by comparison, so I feel like it's definitely a bit more like lower monster box friendly. In terms of the drawbacks for this event, there are no stellar leaders, so if you're looking for a leader, you're looking in the wrong place, but that's okay. If you did roll in Player's Choice Godfest, there's a good chance you have one of those transforming cards, and again, a lot of leaders cards are actually still strong leaders for depending on the type of content you're playing through. Evolving skills may be cumbersome, so the 7-8 stars feature this mechanic of the active skill evolving. I'll go into greater detail about that, but long story short is these active skills can be a little bit problematic or a little bit cumbersome and or awkward, because you have to be able to time it and manage it in an intelligent way in order to actually extract as much value as possible. And then finally, like I mentioned already, the bottom rarity I feel is quite underwhelming overall, because if you have a reasonably well developed box, none of these cards are really going to truly help you out that much overall. Sure, they do have like easy to make weapon assists, but they're not going to change your life overall, and that's definitely can be a bit distressing when they comprise 66% of the rolling pool. But in terms of like what cards are good, it's obviously heavily populated by the top rarity stuff, and which in turn makes this naturally a top heavy event. So like I said, I feel like some rolls is definitely worthwhile for the vast majority of players, but rolling heavily comes down to how valuable these cards are for yourself. For myself, I have quite a deep monster box, so many of these cards may be like nice side grades, not necessarily upgrades, or maybe like slight upgrades, but I'm kind of the type of player who likes to hoard and save up and then roll heavily in an event to drastically advance my rate of power creep in terms of catching up. And that's exactly what I did for the Player's Choice and Seasonal Super Godfest. But with that being said, let me talk about the evolving active skills. So this Prince of Tennis collab does feature all the 7 and 8 star cards having evolving skills. And an evolving skill works by having a player utilize the actual active skill on the card itself, which will give you XYZ effect, and then it will progress to the next step. You cannot progress to the next step unless you actually use the base active skill itself. If you use an inherit on top, it doesn't actually progress your evolving active skill, and you're still stuck on P1 or part 1. And then some of these active skills actually loop around, so they start in P1, they might go to 2, maybe 3, and then return back to 1, and then it has a cyclic nature. And generally speaking, these evolving active skills tend to be quite strong in terms of the cooldown they offer, but at the same time, you have to plan out quite well in advance of when you're going to use said active skill to receive XYZ benefit. Some active skills give you a time extend. The next step might be a shield. The third step may be something else. And you need time extends, you need shields in the vast majority of dungeons, so you have to make sure you manage their actives intelligently in order to actually have the right one come up at the right time. I can definitely foresee this being quite cumbersome, and I can definitely foresee myself dying at some point because I mismanaged my actives. But when you manage your actives properly, I feel like they can have significantly more output compared to other cards because they could be addressing multiple different mechanics in one card, which frees up active skill slots, it frees up inheritance options, it just makes team building potentially easier if you can manage these active skills well, which of course is going to take time, effort, and just knowing the dungeon ins and outs. So with that being said, let's take a look at each and every single card. I'm going to try and keep it relatively brief to give you a better idea. If you do like to read a bit more of the pros and cons slower, I will definitely link this article in the YouTube description down below. So first things first, for the 8-star cards, we have Ryoma. And they are a stellar Seawolf sub because they have super blind resist, they have large amounts of personal damage with three attribute awakenings, which is stronger than a 7 combo. It's 2.5 times each instead of 2 times. And then a 10 combo. So they're going to hit for huge amounts of damage with this large attack stat, which means they're going to be able to double cap with relative ease. Furthermore, their active skill is a multi-step evolving one that does loop back. So it will come back to the very front. So for their active skill, they have a 10% gravity and a time extend buff on a 5-turn cooldown. Cool. You need time extend? Yes. A little gravity, never a bad thing. Maybe it might be useful against certain things, but hey, it's still okay. And then afterwards, it becomes a 1 cooldown part 2, which is a 30% shield and a time extend buff. That's pretty zesty overall. Like, that's pretty great. And that 30% shield may be sufficient for you to tank XYZ hits. You could tank Blue Miru and MD2. One of her hits, you definitely can tank with that. Maybe it's enough for you to tank Hexazion or Gills in Shura 2 and 3 respectively. It does give you that option. And again, we have time extend built in with a shield. And then finally for part 3, we get +5 combos. We void damage void for a single turn. And then 5 times attack for water and fire cards on a 3-turn cooldown. So this active in part 3 is guaranteeing you essentially every single card is going to damage cap or double cap. Their sub-attributes will in turn deal meaningful amounts of damage. That is a big deal because suddenly everyone is pouring out huge amounts of damage. Furthermore, the void damage void active part means you don't actually need to make a VDP. So on Seawolf teams, which does definitely want to have multiple different combos, this can make your life much happier overall. Your Yin Yang Dragon who double caps on their main and sub attribute on a regular basis, who can't deal with void spawns, suddenly is able to pierce through along with everyone else on your team. As a whole, this active skill is incredibly powerful, but you have to make sure you actually have the right form up at the correct time, which of course is going to be one of the harder things to do so. And then one nice aspect about this as well is that the part 1 active skill is only a 5-turn cooldown. And like I said before, using an inherit means you cannot evolve the skill to the next form. But because it's such a low base cooldown, you can inherit like a delay, haste, shield, something to solve floor 1 for you, and then it will charge up definitely in time, and then you can start cycling around and having a good time overall. So I like this active skill for sure. It does do quite a few things. And for MD2, like I already mentioned, it does provide value. You want time extend buffs. The gravity does help because things are tanky. The 30% shield is huge because you can tank Blue Miru's hits, or at least one of her hits. You could probably tank Green Miru's below 50% first hit as well. It just gives you more options. And then the big burst helps you just, destroy absolutely everything in your path. So an incredibly well-tuned card overall, but they do have some drawbacks. The looping active skill, and this is going to be something that's the same for any card that has a looping active skill, it's going to take some effort to juggle and time properly. But once you do, the output performance will be so great. You must hit 3 colors for personal damage. This is actually a bit of a drawback because Seawolf takes away light and wood orbs, and that means you must have at least a dark combo on the board and then some sort of sub with a dark attribute, which is probably okay. You may have Halloween Anime, Red Valkyrie Seal, you'll probably find something. So you have to have those dark orbs present to begin with, otherwise Ryoma does no damage at all, or minimal amounts of just a single 10 combo. So that's definitely a bit of a drawback, something you should keep in the back of your mind where he's not going to be as great if you're lacking those dark orbs. You're most likely only going to have 2 skill boosts because if you don't take the 10 combo, you're not doing much damage and then you're losing out on so much value there. And then you have a reasonably heavy overlap with Pop because Pop gives a little shield, a time extend buff, and an unmatchable clear. So they're both doing reasonably similar stuff, not perfectly similar, similar, but reasonably similar. So if you have Pop, you may not need Ryoma as much, but of course, if you don't have Pop, this might be an amazing sub for your Seawolf teams, and it might be worth trading for, again, if Seawolf is your best team and you're lacking some stellar subs to populate it with. For their weapon assist, their first, or weapon 1, has 2 team healths and a bunch of enhanced orbs. So this is definitely great for Seawolf from like an Awakenings point of view. And then the active skill gives you 2 turns of Void, Damage Void with no Skyfalls. I don't think it's necessarily worthwhile. You're losing a huge opportunity of using their evolved form or their base form as a sub. And then in fact, weapon 2 is also powerful. Gives you a skill boost, team RCVs twice, and team HP. So nice bulk and enhanced healing capabilities. And then the active skill gives you bonus combos and then 2 turns of void damage or damage absorption cancellation. We need damage absorption in virtually every dungeon nowadays, and 2 turns is sufficient. So you're going to solve that problem there. Furthermore, you get a board changer of fire, water, and hearts, which is perfect for Seawolf. So you solve locked board problems. Say you get Kana and MD1. Well, you can board change it away and absorption cancellation and go on your merry little way. Same with Australis as well. If you didn't encounter Kana beforehand, Australis can change your board unfavorably. This fixes it. And at the same time, even if you don't have an absorption spawn to deal with, you have a tri-elemental board changer with favorable awakenings. It's never going to be a dead weight active. And the only drawback I can see as well, you probably want to use them as a sub for now. But again, subs get power crept at some point. This weapon assist is quite strong, and I feel like it will be quite a strong option for Seawolf teams moving forward. For the next 8-star card, I'm not going to try and pronounce names because I'm going to butcher them terribly and get attacked by people. But for their awakenings, they have a 7, 10, a VDP, and a cross. So they can deal large amounts of damage. Royal Oak teams can definitely put them to use. They could have up to 4 skill boosts or 2 with a super poison. So reasonably strong awakenings overall. But what I feel is problematic is their active skill. It's almost the exact same thing from part 1 to part 2, because part 1 is an unlock and tricolor board on 8 turn, and then part 2 is a tricolor board with a 3 times attack buff on a 1 turn cooldown. So I guess in theory, you can use their active skill, and then you can use it again immediately afterwards, which is cool, or maybe you can use the active skill once, and then you become a 1 turn cooldown, which means you utilize the inherit that's on top, and then you just never actually use the active skill again, because you never want to loop around, just in case the inherit that you've taken is useful. I can definitely foresee this being helpful for like key inherits such as like say damage absorption, delays, shields, something you might need later on in the dungeon that will charge up fast enough on a 1 turn cooldown base. I can see that being kind of interesting, but at the same time, Royal Oak teams have so many strong subs available, so I definitely don't think it's worth picking up just for the sub usage. It will definitely get replaced reasonably fast. For their first weapon assist, it's got 4 enhanced water orbs, which makes big damage overall. And then the active skill gives you Void, Damage, Void for 2 turns, and then 2 turns of changing the enemy's attribute to fire. There are very few cards that can do this, and in theory, changing a green spawn to fire makes it so that blue teams deal 4 times more damage than they would have been doing beforehand. So I can definitely see this being a situationally helpful weapon where like you're playing something where you know something incredibly tanky is green and you can counteract it by utilizing this weapon assist. I think it's a pretty cool thing overall, and it's nice, but it's also quite situational. It's going to be difficult to actually justify bringing it into a given dungeon, so I feel like it's more of like a situational pick you bring when you know that there's something that you need to kill quickly as water. For their second weapon assist, this is going to have much more universal value because it gives you a skill boost, 40% blind resist, and then 2 turns of haste through the active skill. These types of weapon assists have tremendous value because it lets you transform more easily and then lets you transform the second time with the haste because you have to wait out X number of turns to get to the next form. So this definitely has great value, but at the same time, it's less universally helpful compared to say like Amatsu's weapon, Lina Inverse, because if you don't take advantage of the enhanced water orbs, it does go a bit to waste. 40% blind is definitely helpful, but I personally feel that having tape or cloud from like Lina or Amatsu tends to be a superior choice overall because that's a big thing you usually want to have on a given team, and bringing it along makes it easier. And then the active skill itself doesn't do anything aside from haste. There's no like buffs, which sometimes is helpful. Like Amatsu's loot gives you an attack and an RCV buff, which sometimes does come in handy. Not all the time, but it's better than just having locked water orbs for 99 turns, I feel. For Yukimura, They are a wonderfully strong Daytona sub for the context of MD2. I don't feel like they're going to be a good choice well, they're still going to be a reasonably strong choice, but they're not going to be that amazing outside of MD2 for a couple of reasons. So why are they a good Daytona sub? Well, they can have 6 skill boosts. You can transform so much easier when you have 6 skill boosts. They also have 777 combo and 2 TPAs, so they do deal respectable amounts of damage. Nowhere near the level of like Halloween Cotton or Daytona himself, but still nice amounts of damage. Should be able to at least damage cap once reasonably often. And then their active skill is unique, but I feel like it is problematic, and I'll tell you why or where it's useful. So, the active skill gives you a full cleric on a 15-turn cooldown. That's incredibly long cooldown for a full cleric, and the problem is you can't inherit something over top of it, so you don't get something that helps you solve floor 1. Maybe if in the future we have a dungeon where we get Awoken Bound and then Bound and like horrible things like that where the full cleric active skill is helpful, then sure, maybe it could be useful. But right now at this point in time, no floor 1s give you this type of problem, so it's a dead active upon entering a dungeon, which definitely does make team building a little harder. Yes, you have the skill boost to transform easier, but you won't be able to put a delay or haste or something on top of them, which definitely can be problematic. But once you get to part 2, it becomes quite meaningful because it gives you 2 turns of attribute and damage absorption cancellation on an 8-turn cooldown. And that's a big deal because in MD2, your assists get removed partway through the dungeon. And then later on in the dungeon, you can encounter Paimon, who is basically just a guaranteed death sentence for Daytona teams. This individual here prevents that because Daytona absorbs light for many turns and then you get executed, so you're never going to kill it. So having 2 turns of absorption cancellation guarantees you're able to kill it because you most likely need 2 turns to kill it anyways, and this is where it saves you out. And this is why I feel like it makes it much more stable for MD2, especially in solo mode where you're not able to bring as many cards to counteract various mechanics. There are very few useful cards with a damage or color absorption cancellation in their base active skill, and this card does bring that. Yes, you could definitely use them in other dungeons, but I feel like because their active skill is a dead weight at the beginning, and it's only absorption cancellation later on, it makes it a little harder to definitely justify bringing. It's great for MD2, but I don't feel like it's that great outside of MD2, because in theory, if you have lots of Halloween Cottons, I don't feel like I would bring them instead of Halloween Cotton in like virtually any situation. And then the fact that they only are sub-attribute only, they don't have a primary attribute, means you don't get color coverage for Shura 3, which makes it harder to include them on a team because they're not covering other colors. Daytona doesn't cover a color. It makes it harder for sure. And like, you don't get extra damage. Like, if it was light, at least their sub-attribute could provide some, but then again, their base damage is not high enough. Like, I am not super attracted to this card, even though I do have Daytona teams. Maybe it's my bias of, like, I have 4 Halloween Cottons on one account, and I can self-co-op, and I can farm MD2 with relative ease, so having this card won't actually change my pad life overall, I feel. So I think it is nice. Definitely strong if you're lacking other options, and again, if you're trying to clear MD2, this card can be a huge boon, especially in solo mode. For their weapon assist, this weapon assist is actually quite strong. It's a skill boost with a 3-turn delay and an enhanced heart Orb Awakening. So it's still nice, like delaying with skill boost, always useful. If you do roll this card and you can't take advantage of them for Daytona, you should make this weapon assist. Or if you're not being able to take advantage of them, even if you have Daytona, make this weapon assist. And then finally for their last weapon assist, it gives you 2 team health and 2 turns of haste. I think it's kind of situational and quite niche. I feel like this delay option is a much better choice overall if you're lacking other options especially. For the Orb Skin card, is this the Orb Skin? This is the Orb Skin card. They are quite strong. They can they can be useful in multiple different aspects. They can work for Royal Oak. They can also work as a weapon assist. So, as a sub for Royal Oak, they can have up to 4 skill boosts or 2 of Super Poison. They have double 10 combo and then some L's, so they make Royal Oak's attack multiplier higher. They will double damage cap with relative ease. It's a nice big attack stat, and their active skill is quite interesting. The first form gives you a spinner and then 2 turns of damage absorption effect. And that damage absorption is valuable because in MD2, there is a damage absorption early on. So you can utilize him to counter that part there. Maybe if you're stalling lots and have lots of haste, maybe you can charge it up by the time you get to that damage absorption floor. Maybe, maybe not. but at least it counters that part, which you do need to bring. And then the best part is, in part 2, it becomes a 2-turn cooldown that gives you a board unlock and creates 5 water orbs over non-hearts. It's orb generation that guarantees activation. That will save you so many times because Indra's lockboard, you can't solve Indra's lockboard, so that's very sad. But like other lockboards like Orochi, you can solve. And even just as a pure orb generator, it's valuable. And this active skill doesn't loop back around. And that means with the 2-turn base cooldown, you can inherit something over top, like shields for like Blue Miru later on. It gives you nice flexibility and at least orb generation for other parts of the dungeon. I think it's still quite a strong card. Just be mindful of the fact that they don't have any VDP, so against void spawns, they are going to bring less value, but I still think they're quite a strong option overall, but at the same time, there are so many good water subs available that you may or may not necessarily need to have them on your given team, but I'm not going to deny that they are strong. I just feel like if you have like Valkyrie Seal, if you have Blue Rex, you have Blue Albert, that's already 3 subs right there. Maybe you throw out a Vion and that's all 4. Like, it may be hard to bring him along is kind of the point. Like, there's so many good water subs at this point in time, but they are definitely strong overall. Just be mindful that they are an Orb Skin, so if you do like this card and Royal Oak is your best team, you are lacking the cards to make something competent, they can be a strong solution for you. You can directly purchase them, but it also means you can't monster exchange for them. In terms of their weapon assist, I am not that big a fan of their weapon 1. It doesn't really do much overall. They're much better off as their second weapon assist because it's similar to Amatsu's loot. It gives you a skill boost and 3 team RCVs along with an RCV buff, a movement time buff, and an attack buff for the subs. And then 2 turns of haste. So, quite similar to Amatsu's loot because Amatsu's loot has skill boost, 2 team RCVs, and a cloud instead of the 3rd team RCV. So, in a vacuum, Amatsu's loot is better, but this is still pretty good overall. And if you don't have any of these like single skill boost, multi-turn haste, weapon assist, it's a good idea to have them because they're so valuable. They help you out in multiple different aspects. They help you transform. They help you farm stuff faster because you can like get those key active skills up in time. So like it is definitely a strong weapon assist. And I feel like if you can't derive value from them as a sub, look at them as a weapon assist. For Fuji, they are one of the strongest Nautilus subs currently available, and it's partially because of their awakenings and because of their active skill. So from an awakenings point of view, they could be 4 skill boosts or quad 7 combo with VDP. And they have a monstrously large attack stat, so their damage output is going to be quite high. Furthermore, they have super blind resist, which gives them more utility there. But it's this active skill that sets them apart. So this is a looping active skill, which means it's going to come back to part 1 again. But every single part of this active skill is a 4-turn cooldown, and every single one of them generates a row of wood orbs. So, orb generation, valuable, and then you get extra effects. Part 1 gives you a time extend and an RCV buff. That's great. We need those things. Part 2 is a 75% shield and a wood skyfall plus the wood row. The 75% shield is always needed basically in every dungeon. Like, you want to be able to tank those big hits from like Hexazeon, Gills, or like any of the big spawns in MD1 and 2. Like, it makes your life better. You don't have to now bring another shielding active skill because if you can manage this looping well, you're gonna have a great time. So you already have time extend, RCV, shield, constant orb generation. And then part 3 is a full cleric active skill because why not? It's a lot of value. Like, you're probably going to have Alina on your team in most cases anyways, but this is still pretty magical overall. Like, it can help you with back-to-back spawns where Alina's used, and then you need to actually utilize another cleric-style active skill. MD1, you have the chance of getting a Woken Bound, and then the next floor is hard unmatchable. This can be a way for you to clear multiple problems back-to-back. Gives you more breathing space for your cleric. You can't rely on them as a primary cleric, but it gives you more breathing space, especially if your cleric is not as great as it could be. Say you don't have Alina. Say you're using Ceres, who is not nowhere near as great. This can be a nice way to supplement her her cleric usage. In terms of drawbacks, it's just managing this active skill. Like, can you manage this looping active skill properly? Because if you can, you're covering so many different mechanics. They hit incredibly hard. They give you that super blind. They're just an amazingly strong Nautilus sub. And again, if you have a Nautilus team and you feel like you don't have enough good, strong cards to populate it with, this card is going to have tremendous value moving forward, I can feel. For their weapon assist, they're nowhere near as strong as their base form. Like, 3 Team RCVs and 3 Wood Rose is kind of cool, but it's just not enough what we want. And then there's other weapon assist, gives you a 2-turn shield plus delay. Those are nice, but again, the opportunity cost of not using their base form I feel is far too high. For this individual here, they have strong offensive awakening, but we don't have a good light leader that wants to use multiple light combos. So a lot of their kit kind of goes to waste. They feel kind of underwhelming. Part 1 is just an RCV, a movement time buff, and an attack buff. We don't need those to solve floor 1. And a 12-turn cooldown, it's kind of long until you want to try and get to part 2. Part 2 is quite strong. It gives you a 5-turn cooldown to make 12 light orbs and a spinner with an unlock. So it's pretty wild, but nowhere to use it well. And as a result, I feel like they're best used as their weapon 2 because it gives you 3 turns haste. There are very few cards that give 3 turns haste. You just have to be mindful of the fact that it is a 20-turn cooldown, which makes it much harder to actually charge up in time. But in terms of the awakenings, that TPA makes Daytona happy. The enhanced light combo makes Daytona's cards happy. And again, if this is on, say, like a low cooldown based card, you can inherit that and then charge them up and have a great time overall. I feel like it would have great value for the future Super Reincarnated Ariel, which will go live probably in the next month or so. And this will be a great weapon assist to slap on top of her because she has a low base cooldown. Now we come to the 7-star cards, and they, for the most part, almost every single 7-star card I feel like has value. Not as much as the 8 stars, but there are some hidden gems in here. So for the first card here, they have a 10 combo and double VDP with a super poison resist and up to 4 skill boost. Pretty nice from an Awakenings point of view. You definitely can utilize them as like a Royal Oak sub. Their active skill is a 3-part looping active, so it's going to come back to the beginning again. So part 1 is a 10-turn cooldown, which gives you a 3-turn delay plus orb generation. That is good. We need delays on floor 1, so we know this is a safe and helpful weapon assist, safe and helpful active skill for part 1. I like that part overall. For part 2, it's a 2-turn cooldown. It gives them a 7 times a self-attack buff, so way too much damage there. And then orb generation. That's nice, not terrible. And then part 3 is Void, Damage, Void, plus Orb Generation. I find it weird that a multiple VDP card gives Void, Damage, Void, but here we are. It's not the greatest looping active skill, but again, we couldn't abuse the fact that it becomes a 2-turn cooldown, which means you could inherit something of value over top. You delay floor 1. You're now a 2-turn cooldown with the inherit on top. I could definitely foresee some utility being used there. And again, it's some emergency orb generation of 3 water, dark, and hard orbs with an unlock. Not a bad thing for part 2 and 3. And again, you can leverage the 2-turn cooldown with an inherit if you need something else partway or later on in the dungeon. So I think it's reasonably nice to have. It'd be fun to play around with, but again, does it outpace other options? No. For their first weapon assist, I actually think this is quite strong. It gives you a skill boost and 80% poison resist. So right away, we're like a Samurai 3 card. And we know Samurai 3 cards are strong and useful because we love skill boost and 80% resist of something. But this weapon goes one step further by giving a useful active skill because it gives you a 1 turn of 75% damage reduction. And 1 turn no Skyfalls, and then Fire Orbs unmatchable. So, assuming you don't care about Fire Orbs or you convert them away, this weapon assist is able to clear unmatchable, give you a big shield to tank those large hits later on, and no Skyfalls to clear no Skyfalls. I think it's quite a strong weapon assist. Like, if it does overcharge, not a bad effect. Even if it doesn't overcharge, these are helpful awakenings overall. For their second weapon assist, I don't think it's truly great at all. Like, weapon 1 is much better. Like, mixing 2 colors, there's no leader that wants water and dark. So these awakenings just go to, one of them goes to waste, unfortunately. And the active skill really doesn't accomplish anything we want. For Sanada, they're actually quite a strong fire sub. And if you don't have a good fire light sub, this definitely can be a strong candidate because they can have either 4 skill boosts or a 10 combo with double 7 plus the VDP. So large amounts of personal damage for sure, large attack stat. And then their multi-step transforming access is part 1, they give a 50% shield for 3 turns on a 15-turn cooldown. That is quite long, unfortunately, but you can argue that a shield does give you the ability to let you tank floor 1 possibly. It's not as good as a delay, but 50% might be enough because the problem is you want to get to the next active skill part because they do more things. Part 2 is 1 turn of haste on a 2-turn cooldown. So it's kind of a weird way to like charge your team up, but you know, it does work at the same time. And then part 3 is where you'll be stuck on, but that's okay to be stuck because you get a Void Damage Void active skill on a 4-turn cooldown. So most red teams usually have enough VDP, but Seawolf teams do more damage by matching multiple combos. Rosalind teams do way more damage matching multiple combos. So you don't have to pick the VDP Super Awakening. You can just take Skill Boost Plus. So useful aspect over there. I feel like it's mostly like a way to possibly also leverage the lower base cooldown after they reach the 2nd or 3rd part, because you could possibly use Inherits over top. So I think it's still a reasonably strong sub overall. Definitely could possibly find space on a team if you're lacking other options. For their weapon 1, it gives you 60% jammer, 40% blind. That's a lot of resist through a weapon assist. And then the active skill gives you a 75% damage reduction, and then movement time, RCV, and attack buff. So a universal buffer with a lot of resists and a big shield. You would like to have these. Like, it does bring a bit of everything useful. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be a bad weapon to have. May not be your first choice, but it does give quite a good range of utility and value. And again, if you have a shallower monster box, that's probably a great way to pick up lots of resists. For their second weapon, it gives you Bind Immunity and an L. There are not too many cards that have that particular combination, but it's highly niche and situational when you want to use it. So for the most part, I feel like this is a niche weapon. I feel like weapon 1 is much better from a universal point of view. For Renji, I am disappointed in this card. There's no Wood Cross leader out there, so right away, their awakenings don't do much. So I can't justify bringing them. Like, they do give a 75% shield in row, no Skyfalls unlock. It's just, like, I can't justify bringing them. There's nowhere to use them. Maybe if there's a Wood Cross leader in the future, we definitely could utilize them. For weapon 1, you get tape resist, 40% poison resist, and then you get no Skyfalls for 4 turns, RCV buff, and then 4 turns of attribute absorption cancellation. I feel like this is going to be a situational weapon overall. We don't have many instances where we need lots of attribute absorption cancellation, but 4 turns is quite a long time, and it's only a 12-turn cooldown, so I definitely feel like it could be utilized for that aspect. Definitely much better compared to their base form, because there's no place to use them. And then for their final weapon, there's a follow-up attack, and like, what year is this? Everything has auto follow-up attack pretty much at this point in time, so like, it's a full cleric, but like, the 10 rem draw is infinitely superior in virtually every way, and there's a good chance most players have the 10 rem draw. For Jin, they have enhanced dark and wood combos, but the problem is there's nowhere to actually use them. If it was just one color, sure, it'd be much stronger, because then they can have other awakenings that do stuff. So because of that, their active skill, or their awakenings are already quite sad. For their multi-step, non-looping active, the part 1 gives you an attack, RCV, and time buff on a 15-turn cooldown. Again, floor 1s, we don't need that, so it's kind of awkward at the beginning. Part 2 gives you a 7-turn cooldown of Void Damage Void on a 2-turn cooldown. That is pretty strong overall, but again, is this something we actually need to have? I feel like it's highly situational and niche overall for the most part. For their first weapon, Skill Boost Bind Immunity with Follow Attack. We don't need the Follow Attack, so I'm just going to put that back down. So, Skill Boost Bind Immunity. The Chinese Celestials all do this. So, from just an Awakenings point of view, this weapon assist is not very good. But the active skill might be valuable. It's a 13-turn cooldown that gives you 3 turns of Void Damage Void. So, if you are trying to swipe through content or farm content quickly, it's a good way to ensure that you're able to kill those Void spawns with minimal amounts of thinking. Just be mindful that you will have 3 turns of Heart unmatchable. But in farming setups, I feel like that's definitely not going to be a problem. You can find ways to like just circumnavigate that completely. So you can kind of think of it as a 3-turn Void Damage Void on a 13-turn cooldown. Situational usage, but quite strong when you need to use it, I feel. And then for weapon 2, you get a bunch of enhanced dark orbs and a 2-turn delay. Whoop-de-doo. We have so many better delay options out there. Their weapon 1 is much more unique, and I would rather keep it in that form. And next we come to someone's name I can't pronounce. And like, they're an okay card, but it's their weapon assist we really want to look at, because their weapon assist is one of the best delay options possible in the game. They give you 2 team HPs, and we need bulk in endgame content, so your delay is bringing you bulk. You also have team RCV, and 40% poison resist. So from an Awakenings point of view, these are pretty nice Awakenings. And then the active skill gives you 4 turns of delay. This is the only card in the game that has 2 team HPs and a 4-turn delay. Kaiba is the next best with 3-turn delay, but it doesn't give you the team RCV and the poison resist, so this weapon assist is universally helpful. I can definitely foresee this being utilized as one of your delay options of choice because a lot of times you need extra health, but it may be hard to find ways to squeeze in more team HPs, and this weapon assist can do so. Remember what I said at the beginning, weapon assists age the slowest in the sense that they will be relevant the longest. So if you are fortunate enough to roll this card, because you can't monster exchange them, but if you do roll them, convert to this weapon and you're going to have an incredible delay option for the foreseeable future. Weapon 2 doesn't do anything by comparison. I guess it does do something, but it's nowhere near as magical. It's a 12-turn cooldown for 2 turns of damage absorption cancellation. That's actually a pretty low cooldown, but this delay is so much spicier by comparison. For Kite, they have double 10 combo and a bunch of time extends, but I don't feel like they're going to be utilized even on the future Blackbird, which will come out at some point. It's a transforming Dark Watch / submarine that scales off 10 combo awakenings. So, that's cool, but there's not much to utilize them because their multi-step active is a wooden dark column on a 14-turn cooldown. That's absolutely a garbagely long cooldown for what it actually does, which is unfortunate. And then once they are on part 2, it's a 4-turn cooldown that gives a self-attack buff, unlock, and tri-colored board. Sure, that's cool, but I feel like this would be a budget option for the future teams, so not much usage overall, and part 1 is just so underwhelming. For their weapon 1, I feel like this is where most of their value will be found because it's triple team HP. Triple team HP is nice, and a time extend, because, movement time is never a bad thing. So it is useful from an Awakenings point of view, and then the active skill itself gives you 2 turns of 75% damage reduction, unlock, and then changes the board to Wood, Dark, and Hearts. The board changer can be problematic because it only truly benefits teams that can actually utilize those colors. So Daytona, Seawolf, Royal Oak, none of them can use this, unfortunately. Nautilus obviously can because the green orbs are present. So it's a more restrictive shielding active skill, but at the same time, it gives you 2 turns of 75% reduction, which I think is helpful in Valkyrie Seal's dungeon, for instance, where you need tons of health because everything hits hard, and you need a large multi-turn shield to deal with the Odin floor. So not a bad thing overall, but I feel like if you have Larhart's weapon, they're just a better choice. They have 1 less team HP, but they have 3 turns of shielding instead of 2, which gives you more safety against the Odins. For their weapon assist, it's a 2-turn delay. Okay, whoop-de-doo, you do nothing. That's another 2-turn delay that does nothing. I don't know where it was. Maybe I said that before. Either way, we're on to the last 7-star card, who is actually a stellar Nautilus sub. So, they have a wood attribute, and that means their sub-attribute has the potential to deal meaningful damage, which is great. From an Awakenings point of view, they have 4 skill boosts, 7, 10, and VDP. They are efficient at what they do for damage output, and then their Super Awakenings can give them an extra VDP, which I think is not necessary, Super Poison Resist, which is exciting, and Tape Resist if you have Super Poison somewhere else. So, great Super Awakenings and great Awakenings overall. They can damage cap with these. Their sub-attribute will deal respectable damage, and in fact, it becomes meaningful damage with their looping active skill. So, their looping active skill starts on a 2-turn cooldown, which is absolutely beautiful because you're able to inherit anything over top, and you can start the cycling process with relative ease. So you can solve floor 1s. I like that. And then for the looping active skill, part 1 is a time extend buff. Okay, cool. We do need time extends. It's nice to have. Part 2 is a 50% shield on a 2-turn cooldown. We need shields. We love damage reduction. It helps you survive multiple dangerous stuff. And then for part 3, we have a 20 times self-attack buff. 20 times. Their main attribute and their sub-attribute will double damage cap. They're going to have 4 or quad damage caps. They can deal 8 billion damage with this. And then they're also going to create a 3x3 wood box, because yay, let's make more wood orbs. On a 5-turn cooldown, then it recycles through. So you have a time extent and a shield and a huge guaranteed way to make it so they deal spectacular amounts of damage. You shouldn't underestimate the value of a sub-attribute double capping. This is partially why Halloween Cottons are so strong in Daytona teams, because their sub-attribute can deal meaningful damage. You can deal meaningful damage with Toyama with their Part 3 active, and even without the Part 3 active, there's a good chance it's still going to do large damage, because if their main attribute does do double damage cap, their sub-attribute's going to be hitting for at least 500 million. So right away, you have a card hitting for about 5 billion damage, maybe more. That's a big deal. Big damage output. Quite exciting. In terms of problems, you have to roll this. You can't monster exchange. And again, timing the looping active skill will take some finessing, but it's quite powerful when you're able to actually juggle and manage all the different mechanics. Then, with the 8-star for Nautilus, you have multiple ways to gain access to a shield, which is pretty exciting overall. And then for their tennis racket, or their weapon 1, they have double team HP, double team RCV. They give you 3 spinners and fire unmatchable 3 times movement time. I think that's kind of cool. Like, nothing really quite does this, but the opportunity cost of not using their base form is far too great overall. And then for their second weapon, they have an attacker killer and a bunch of wood rows. Like, cool, but again, the opportunity cost of not using their base form is so high. And now we come to the 6-star cards. And unfortunately, the 6-star cards are much more disappointing by comparison. For a well-developed box, they're probably not going to bring really any value, and they do comprise 66-ish% of the rolling pool. So for the first one, they have the ability to make a column of water orbs twice, but like you can't system this for like systemable stuff. The Sabito system is just better. It can loop. It's just not that great unless you need 2 turns of attribute absorption, maybe. Situational overall. For their weapon 1, it gives you tape, resist, and 2 turns of attribute absorption cancellation and 2 turns of 50% shield. So we do need shields, and attribute absorption might be situationally helpful. So maybe this weapon might be a situational choice, but it's still a bit of a far cry overall. For their second weapon, it's a Cross Awakening, which is still reasonably rare, and it gives you a smattering of various other awakenings. It does give you movement time, RCV, and unmatchable orb clearing. Maybe as a, like, again, like if you're able to at least line up all these different mechanics and then utilize it, it can be useful, but it's a lot of different things and not the greatest awakenings overall. For this individual here, they have, like, they do a bit of stuff. They have a 3-turn cooldown for an attack buff, an RCV buff, and a self-attack buff, so they can deal meaningful damage, but they don't give super resist. They can give 4 skill boosts. They don't have that great damage output. It's just kind of like, I'm a very generic jack of all trades that doesn't really do much in any way, but I'm not terrible if you have lack of options overall. And then for their tennis racket or weapon 1, they have bind immunity and attack while above 50%, which is, I guess, okay, situational. It gives you a time extend buff and an RCV buff, but I feel like it's still quite a low impact weapon overall. For weapon 2, it gives you not much. Like, it's a budget shield option. If you need a damage reduction, you have nothing else available, I would kind of look into it, but as a whole, kind of an underwhelming card. For Akaya, they have value if you have at least 3 of them and you own Gung Ho Belial, because they have the capacity to form a fast and efficient TA3 team, because their active skill will change their own attribute to dark for 6 turns on a 6-turn cooldown, so they're always going to be dark, and now they become dark. And then they get 6 times personal attack damage. Wait, what? They also have 4 attack while above 50% with a weapon. That's 5 of them. So that right away is 32 times personal damage with another 6 times on top of that. Plus the leader skill multipliers from Gung Ho Belial. Plus the dark row you're probably going to be making. You can definitely just make a single dark row and just mow through TA3 with relative ease with Gung Ho Belial as your friend, or as your 2 leaders. You need 3 of these cards, and it's only going to be useful in this context because in order to get this huge damage output, you have to use their active skill all the time, so that means they can't use inherits. So I definitely can foresee this being pretty cool and pretty fun, but you need to have 3 of them and Gung Ho Belial to make it used. But again, it's pretty efficient, pretty fast, and pretty mindless overall. And again, you can always just combo more, and Gung Ho Belial does even more damage. So options there. Their main attribute will definitely double cap. Their sub-attribute will deal large and meaningful amounts of damage, which in turn makes TA3 easier to play overall. For their weapon assists, it's highly situational. Like, it's like you have skill bind, you have attack while below 50%. Sure, maybe you have not many attack while belows, but I wouldn't use them because I would like to keep 3 of them. So like their weapons have to be absolutely amazing, which they are unfortunately not. The base form just has more merits. It's just not doing enough. For this individual here, they actually transform into the Orb Skin card, but you don't get the multi-step active skill that makes them great, so they're just pretty awkward. Like, they're a really budget Royal Oak sub if you want like a 2-turn delay with a single skill boost. Like, it's pretty budget because if you don't cancel damage absorption effects. This is kind of a dead weight active, so I don't foresee this being used. For their weapon 1, they have 2 skill bind resist and 40% poison resist. For teams that actually need to utilize skill bind resist, this could be helpful, but there are options that give team HP alongside of it, so I feel like this is kind of like you would choose this if you didn't have other options available, or maybe you just really wanted poison resist because the active skill is pretty niche. It changes water enemies' attribute to water, so wood teams do more, so maybe a highly situational pick there, but niche overall. For their second weapon assist, it gives you a time extend buff and an RCV buff, board unlock, and a board changer. I guess that's kind of cool, but like it won't take priority over any other weapon assist overall, I feel. And then for the next 6-star card, Bunta, they have the ability to spawn 2 columns of fire orbs. So maybe that could be useful for certain farming sets. I don't know. I think it's pretty awkward. They're not going to be used as a sub of any team that I can think of. Their first weapon is a skill boost and a 1-turn delay and a orb generation of a row. So if you need fire orb generation, sure, it's a way to make an instant row to swipe, but really low impact weapon overall. Weapon 2 has 3 enhanced fire orbs, team RCV, and team HP. You get unmatchable of wood, so if you don't care about wood, it's an unmatchable clear, RCV buff, and attack buff. It's like, it does very little. It's a low cooldown. It's going to overcharge at bad times. It's not even that great awakenings. I don't feel like I could justify utilizing this weapon anywhere. For Shinji, they have mixing dark and water enhanced combos, and as mentioned before, mixing these 2 colors does no good because there's no team that actually utilizes it, so you automatically have 2 dead awakenings. The chances of actually using them is so low. Maybe if you need a budget unmatchable solution, sure, but much better options exist. For their first weapon, mixing 2 orb enhances. You can argue if you are able to take advantage of all those colors, sure, maybe, but pretty situational niche card overall. It's only a 1-turn delay. For weapon 2, skill bind cloud 2 enhanced dark orbs, full awoken bind clear, full unmatchable clear, budget solution if you need a cleric, but again, 10 pull rem draw is an infinitely superior solution in basically every way possible. Yuta, it's only their weapon 1 that I feel like has value because it gives you a void damage void on a 7-turn cooldown with unmatchable. The unmatchable might be useful, but the void damage void can help Daytona teams, I feel, because it's a low enough cooldown that you could inherit it and it does come up fast enough. Obviously, the more Halloween cottons you have, the less needed this weapon is, but again, it can be a way for you to bring void damage void for your Daytona teams. And even if you're not playing Daytona, it's a 7-turn cooldown for void damage void, which is actually quite low, which means you can definitely incorporate it on certain farming build setups. For their weapon assist, it's double team HP. We have so many weapons that give at least 2 team HPs that this is nothing special. It makes a row of light, which, it's just, this is not doing much overall. I would rather just stick with their first weapon. And then finally, we come to the last card in this event. This is a lot of talking for myself. And then for the last card, maybe they have 4 skill boosts. I can't really foresee them being used in any way, shape, or form. For their weapon assist, it gives you a full board of dark orbs. So yay, if you're dark swipe farming, cool. You get the rows, you get the extra stuff. It's not a bad thing to have, like if you're farming stuff, like Gung Ho Blau likes to farm stuff. Swiping could be pretty cool as well. Like you could deal large amounts of damage for most of your team because a full board of dark is huge. But again, pretty situational overall. And Vitra does give better awakenings, I feel, overall, if you're just after the awakenings. Because Vitra's weapon is the rows, but skill boost and big time extend, probably better for your team. And then for their last weapon assist, it's 40% poison resist and a 30% gravity. And maybe if you're doing gravity cheesing of some way, shape, or form, or farming things and you want to gravity things down, maybe, but highly situational overall. So, the big question is, do I plan on rolling? So, due to the depth of my monster box and the fact that I rolled heavily in Player's Choice and the Seasonal Super Godfest within the last month or so, I've acquired tons of great stuff overall. Like, I have enough toys, so to speak, to deal with all current content in the game. And that is definitely means I have less motivation to actually roll because I have enough stuff to clear everything currently available. It'd be nice to pick up stuff, but a lot of the stuff might be side grades or maybe small upgrades. Obviously, some cards are quite powerful and strong, and rolling them will definitely be helpful, but it's not as big of a priority for myself because I have enough stuff to clear all content currently available in the game. But that may not be the case for yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, because you may not have have as much stuff available, and rolling in here might result in much bigger wins, so to speak. Like, getting side grades, I guess, are cool, but getting an upgrade is meaningful. And if many of these cards end up being upgrades for yourself, it definitely can be worth rolling. And as a whole, I definitely feel like it is worth rolling at least a couple of times because every card does have at least 2 weapon assists. You're probably going to, and all the 7-8 stars for the most part have value of some way. So at least some rolls should hopefully yield a couple of those. It will give you more box diversity. And again, the less options you have currently available in your monster box, the higher value this event will be for yourself. With that being said, let me know what you think about this event in the comments down below. Do you think this is actually a meaningful event, or do you feel like it is a little underwhelming and you'd rather save your stones? With that being said, hopefully you all have a truly fantastic day. I wish you all the best luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.